This is the Morrigan class patrol destroyer built out of Lego. This is roughly a 1 to 60 scale, so it's not quite minifigure scale, but after building this design was by Julie V, who is now a Lego designer. After building this, I thought it'd be fun to figure out how the internal deck layout would be for a minifigure scale ship, where it would probably be like a 1 to 40 scale. So here's the ship. It's standing up on its drive cone, which it's not really meant to do, but that's okay. It's just for a demonstration. And we're trying to figure out how the decks would be laid out. And we can start off with the airlock. So between these two yellow lines, we've got the airlock or the airlock deck. And this is also where the point defense cannons are. So the point defense cannons, there's two of them. When they retract, they're going to take up a lot of space. So there's not a lot of space in this deck except for the airlock. And what else is in this ship? So it's got some torpedo tubes at the frontmost part, the forwardmost portion. There's two torpedo tubes, but I imagine the magazine is maybe 4 or 6 torpedoes. So it's not going to shoot a ton of torpedoes. It's just that's not its job. But this forwardmost portion is dedicated to the torpedo tubes, the torpedo magazine, and sensor kind of packages and whatever stuff at the front of the ship. This leaves us with a little bit of space here, maybe space for 2 decks. And I imagine the topmost deck, deck 1, is going to be for the crew bunks. This is where the beds are, where there'd be a head and a shower. And deck 2 is going to be the cockpit, basically the command deck. I say the cockpit because it's really actually pretty tiny and there's only a little bit of room there. So we've got our first 3 decks, and then at the aftmost portion, so here that line represents the aftmost part, and presumably there's some space for storing water and which is reaction mass, and also fuel pellets, and who knows what else. So here's storage for those sort of things, and we're left then with 2 more decks. So we've got deck 4. And I figured this is where the mess hall and the galley will go. But this room is also dedicated to medical. So there's a medical crash couch there and also some exercise equipment. It's kind of a multi-purpose deck for the crew. And then the final deck 5 is for engineering, where the main structure here is a fusion reactor and also maybe some machine shop tools and things. So let's have a look now at my little sketches for these 5 decks. And we're going to start up here at the top with deck 1. And I came up with 2 different versions. So in both of these versions, there's an outer hall, which is in yellow, and then an inner hall, which is in green. And this is a very important design aspect. This is what I used when I built my minifigure Rocinante. It's not actually done yet, but it's getting close. The outer hall is continuous throughout the whole thing from top to bottom or from forward to aft, but the inner hall comes as a set of drawers, so you can slide these decks out. And note that these decks are about 1 brick thick. I should also note the scale here. So one of these little squares is the equivalent of a 2 by 2 brick. So this is 2 studs by 2 studs. Anyway, this layout, this version 1, didn't quite work. It was a nice bathroom and shower, I should say the head and shower, but then there wasn't a lot of space for bunks. So I redesigned it in this way, and I like this version better. These bunks might have to get shrunk down a little bit, but here they are. I imagine that on this side, I think this is the port side, there's 2 bunks because this is a little hard to manage getting around. And over here, there's 3. So in my Lego version, there are 6 crew altogether. This is where 5 of them sleep. Also, there's a head, here's the toilet, and a shower. Not a whole lot to this deck. And then right here is the deck hatch with a ladder, so you can get down to deck 2. So one of the reasons I put the main place where the crew sleep at the very top is because nobody's going through this area to get to another deck. So maybe hopefully the crew can get some sleep here and be left in peace. Hopefully the bathroom stuff isn't too loud. Now we go to deck two, and there's not actually a lot to see here. It's the command deck. We've got three crash couches. This is probably where the commander sits, the ship's commander, and this person would also be in charge of damage control and maybe any kind of releasing the chaff, whatever it's called, to create laser noise to distract ships' torpedoes from hitting. And then there's two other crash couches. That's for the pilot and for the gunner. And that's it. That's kind of it for deck two. We moved now to deck three, and things get a little more interesting here. First, let's go back and forth here. So note the orientation of that triangle. And it switches over because now we have these parts building out into a new triangle that goes the opposite way. And we have point defense cannons taking up a lot of space. So here's the starboard and port point defense cannons. And once again, we have an outer hull that's colored yellow, and then here's the inner hull. And there's a little bit of space between them. Now, ideally, there would be enough space that a crew person could fit in there and do some repairs or whatever they need to do. We couldn't really do that here. It's about one stud thick, but at least there is some space. This deck is dominated by the point defense cannons and by the airlock. So here's the airlock. And in this airlock, we've got the outer doors right here. They can slide. So there they slide open. And then the inner doors, just to save a little room, they would just simply open like a regular swinging door. Also on this deck, I didn't anticipate being able to fit these things in, but it looks like I can put in a little tiny captain's cabin. This is a very, very tiny space, but the commander of the ship gets their own private room. So it is what it is. It's not bad. And then on the starboard side, we've got an armory, which is more of just a decent sized closet. So just a reminder, this space, this is about 6 studs wide and maybe 3 studs deep, plus whatever this space amounts to. And then last we have the deck hatch. And note where it is. So in the previous deck, that deck hatch was roughly here, and it is moved 1 stud, what is that, dorsally to make it fit so that we have a little bit more room on deck three. Deck four is going to do the same thing. So deck four, this deck hatch has moved again. And here we've got the main sort of crew place to hang out. This is where you go. So outer hall, inner hall, then right there's the ladder to get up to deck three or down to deck four. Here's the galley. Not a whole lot to it. It's a pretty basic sort of galley. You're not going to do an elaborate meal on a Morrigan class patrol destroyer. Here's the table where you can sit around and eat, play cards, do stuff. I imagine there might be a wall screen here to watch movies. This is the place to socialize. But it's also the place to go if you are sick or injured. This is where the ship's one and only medical crash couch is, and also where the ship's exercise equipment is stored. Maybe there's a stationary bike that kind of folds out of the wall. Also note, there's no head on this level. There was only one head, aka toilet, and that was on deck one. So hopefully that toilet doesn't stop working. And then finally we go to deck five. Once again, an outer and inner hull. This deck is dominated by a fusion reactor in the very center. So fusion reactor, we also have machine tools over here, a cabinet of machine tools and a workbench. And here's a couple more crash couches because the crew, as I've imagined it, is 6 in total. So we've got 3 crew in crash couches on the command deck, 1 crew member in the medical crash couch on deck 4, and then 2 more in engineering on these 2 crash couches. So if they're doing a high G burn or they're in combat maneuvers, then everybody's strapped into a crash couch in either decks 2, 4, or 5. And of course, here's the ladder to get up to those upper decks. So that's my imagined layout. I don't have any current plans for building a minifigure scale patrol destroyer, but who knows, maybe you, the person watching this, want to give it a go, or maybe this is just a fun video to watch. So we've got our torpedo tubes up here, sensor package, deck one with the crew bunks for five, plus the head and shower. Deck two, the command deck, where we have crash couches for three people, the gunner, the pilot, the commander. Deck three, where we've got our airlock, the captain's cabin, a very teeny tiny captain's cabin. And just to be clear here, the cabin is tiny. We're not talking about a tiny captain. Although if the captain is really tiny, then that's great because it's a tiny cabin. And also an armory. Deck four, we've got all these things, mess hall, the galley, medical crash couch, some exercise equipment. Deck five, we've got engineering, which features a fusion reactor and some machine tool kind of stuff, plus some crash couches. And there we go. That's my Morrigan class patrol destroyer minifigure scale plan, which who knows, maybe I'll build it or maybe you'll build it. Have fun.